Hey, welcome back to another video. Thank you for joining me today. As always, I hope you're keeping well. So I'm going to be talking you through my 2023 end of year reading stats and my 2024 reading goals, and just having a big chit chat about all the books that I read last year. I will admit I have been majorly procrastinating on making this video because there's certain statistics that I just kind of wanted to stick my head in the sand about. Especially when it comes to the spending side of things. But I think they're all relevant and I think it's interesting to talk about these types of things. Let's get all the procrastination out of the way and let's get into these statistics. So I set my reading goal in 2023 to 50 books. This is a challenge that I have tried to do a numerous amount of times and haven't been successful. I think the closest I got was in 2016, with reading 44, 45 books, but it's always just been a very big number for me to do. I can say that I successfully completed this reading challenge for the first time ever, and I ended up reading 52 books in 2023. Out of these 52 books, 36 of them were from my own personal collection that were on my physical TBR, the books behind me, and 16 of them were from the library. And this is something that I've noticed in previous years when I have read more than I expected to read. It stems from the fact that I'm using the library more often. And so this tried and proven bit of data collection is going to be something that I put to use in 2024 because I think it's the only way I'm going to reach my reading goal this year. I also decided to track the amount of pages that I read this year, and I ended up reading 14,016 pages. I was initially aiming for 20,000, and then I bumped it down to 15,000, and I still missed the mark. I still feel happy that I got that many pages read. The longest book that I read was Our Share of Night by Mariana Enriquez. This ended up being 727 pages long, and this was also the last book that I read in 2023. And the shortest book that I read was The Grown Up by Gillian Flynn, which was only 66 pages long, so a novella. Out of the 52 books that I read, only 15 of them were translations, so that's something that I want to focus again on more in 2024 because my stats for the previous year were much better when it came to the amount of translated books that I was reading. So I've started off 2024 with reading a good amount of translations just right off the bat. My most read genre was horror, and out of the 52 books, 32 of them were horror novels, or considered horror novels at least, according to Storygraph. When it comes to my most read author, I actually ended up being tied between 7 different authors. I read 2 of their books each. My most read authors were Mariana Enriquez, A.M. Shine, Otessa Moshfegh, Grady Hendrix, Julia Armfield, Toshikazu Kawaguchi, and T. Kingfisher. A good mix of authors there. Next, we're going to get into the actual Storygraph statistics, which is like my favorite aspect of this video because you know me, I love a good pie chart. So firstly, we have moods. The most popular moods that I read from last year were dark, mysterious, tense, reflective, emotional, and adventurous, which has moved up significantly since the previous year. And then we have challenging, sad, funny, lighthearted, and hopeful. So we have a few new descriptions of moods in there, which, it's nice. It's nice to branch out a little bit. I want to have a little look at what was considered funny, though. Okay, for some reason, A Certain Hunger is regarded as funny. Totally funny, cannibalism, num num num. Next up, we have pace. So the pacing that I mostly read from was medium at 65%, and then we have slow at 15 and fast at 19. I feel like that's pretty average. I feel like my pacing pie charts never really look much different. I usually go for slow to medium reads. It's really rare that I feel like I read fast books or that I read a book quickly and then I can consider it like a fast, easy to read sort of book. Then we have page number, which is kind of embarrassing because I was saying in my mid-year check-in that I was going to be getting all the green in there, like reading tons of books that are over 500 pages. I read 2 books over 500 pages, and one being By the Skin of My Teeth because it was the last book that I read in 2023. So yeah, most of the books that I read were under 300 pages. That was 67% of the overall books, and then there was 29% 3 to just under 500. So, it's all right. The fiction to non-fiction graph, no non-fiction. I made an effort to have a goal to read at least 5 non-fiction books for 2023, and that failed, obviously. Now, I did try to read non-fiction. There was like 3 different books that I picked up over the year, and for some reason, my brain just wouldn't allow me to get into them. I mean, and that happens from time to time. Sometimes, you know, you pick up a book and it's just not the right time for you to read it. So then we have my most read genres. So as I talked about earlier, horror was the overall winner, but I also read a lot of literary fiction. I read a decent amount of fantasy. There are a couple of books that are in there that are considered thrillers. Again, those would have been horror novels. I wouldn't really consider them thrillers. And I do have to like re-explain this every year. This particular graph, it has the same books under multiple different genres. So it's not a true sort of representation of the genres that I read, but it kind of gives you a gist of what I was up to. Format, as always, 100% print. I have been thinking about getting a Kindle, but I feel like that's going to be at some point later in the necessary purchases list. And I do think maybe getting a Kindle would help me read more, because I hear that all the time. People say if you have an ebook on the go and like, you know, your print book at home or whatever, it just encourages you to read more often. It's something I'm thinking about, I'm toying with. So next up we have my all-time favorite statistic chart on Storygraph. I am obsessed with this chart. I will check it every single day once I've read a certain amount of pages. Every time I've checked off a book as read, I immediately go to look at it to get a little bit of a dopamine kick. This is the number of books and pages chart. So it just tracks the number of books that you read each month and the number of pages you read each month. Fairly simple. So the blue is the books and the red is the pages. And as you can see, September was my most successful reading month. I read 8 books. I will say some of those 8 books were shorter books. Some of them were novellas. I don't want to give any sort of idea of like, yeah, I read this many books and isn't that great? It's like, yeah, but how long were they? And do you remember them? I love that discourse that's going on at the moment. And then as you can see, my worst reading month was June. I only read 2 books and those 2 books came to 552 pages. And I feel like that's pretty good anyway. Like that, you know, over 500 pages in a month, I think that's grand. Like that's realistic. I was working a lot in June, so that's why it was that low. But yeah, a really kind of up and down reading year. And as you can see, I really slowed down towards the end of the year. In October to December, I only read 4 books each month, but the page count was pretty good. So I was still fairly happy with what I was reading and like the quantity that I was reading, regardless of the amount of books being read. You know what I mean? It's definitely much better than last year's chart, I have to say. If you remember, if you'd seen it, I'll link it above if you want to check it out. October was my most successful month and it honestly looked like a mood chart to me. And then finally we have the star ratings chart. So as you can see, I really utilized the fact that you can give half stars and quarter stars on Storygraph. And I also made an effort to make sure that I was reviewing every book that I read. For some reason it says 51, so I wonder what the one book that I didn't end up rating was. That's going to bother the shit out of me now. But anyway, as you can see, my most popular rating was 4 stars. I read 24 star books. I only read 3 5-star books. And I only read 1 book that I considered 2 stars. And I think I was being generous at that. I have a vlog about that book coming up. I thought I posted it last year, and so it'll be coming up sometime this month. So you're going to see Roy from the past. The majority of books that I read last year, I mostly really enjoyed. And I read a lot of really strong books. I read a lot of contemporary novels when it came to literary fiction and even horror novels. So overall, I think the quantity was great and the quality was mostly excellent. So I'm really happy. I feel like it was time well spent, and I think that's all you really want out of your kind of like reading experience. Then I want to talk about my book collection stats. So I decided to track a little bit more in depth what's coming in and what's going out of the collection and the overall amount of books that I have in general. Just to keep an eye on it. So the amount of books that I bought in 2023 was 74 books. That includes used books as well. So that is probably the most amount of books that I've ever purchased or gotten in 1 year. Out of the 74 books, 40 of them were brand new, but some of those were like gifts. Some of those I bought with vouchers that I had. Some of those I got with discount codes. Out of those 74 books, 34 of them were used. So those are books that I bought in charity shops. Those are books that I bought in secondhand bookshops. And yeah, I feel like that ratio, 34 to 40, is pretty close, you know, in being 50-50, and buying more books that were secondhand was a priority to me when I was entering 2023. I felt like I hadn't been making the effort to look around charity shops or look for books in secondhand bookshops based on the fact that I was like, oh, well, I can barely find books that I like in new bookshops. How am I going to find them secondhand? And surprisingly, when you start looking, you start finding them. The books that I unhauled from my collection in 2023 was 31. So again, like what was coming in versus what was going out, I feel like that's a decent amount of books to get rid of. I find it quite easy to get rid of books, but again, those 31 books, I read them all. So that's another thing, is that I try not to get rid of books that I haven't read. Currently, my book collection stands at 322 books in total. Now that also includes graphic novels and manga books and all that sort of thing. So yeah, that is probably the most books that I've ever owned. If we get down to the nitty gritty on how many unread books that I currently have, I believe I went into 2023 with just over 40 unread books. I more than doubled it. I'm currently at 98 unread books out of the 322 books that I have in my collection. People like make it out to be like a problem to have a certain amount of unread books, and like the way I'm viewing it nowadays is that it's future happiness. If I buy a book, I am going to read that book, regardless if I bought it yesterday or 5 years ago or what have you. Like, it's going to get read. I think I just have a little bit more patience in myself, and especially since I had such a successful reading year last year and I'm hoping to be able to emulate it this year, I'm not really too fussed about it. And then finally, I saved the best to last. These are the money statistics. So how much I spent on books in 2023, where I spent my money on books in 2023 and all that sort of thing. So first and foremost, RIP Book Depository. Before it closed down, I ended up spending €149.57 on books there. And I can safely say that if they never closed down, that amount of money would not have been spent. That was mostly done in like one bulk purchase, like a month before they were due to close. At the time, I was very unaware of like what I was going to be using as an alternative to the book depository, so I was kind of panic buying. And then overall on Amazon for the entire year, I spent €384.07 on books, and that also includes a big ticket item purchase that I made in the summer, where I bought the Claymore box set. So it's a Claymore manga. I think it was like €156. Of that, 384 was just on like one box of manga, basically. When it comes to secondhand books, this was the hardest one to tot up because I wasn't keeping track initially. But I spent around €108.88 from what I can gather. So those are the books that I bought in charity shops. That also includes the books that I bought mostly in Chapter's secondhand book section, which have gotten significantly more expensive. The last hardback that I bought in there was, I think it was like $11.99 or $12.99 for a used hardback book. I was like, when it comes to the books that I bought in bookshops, I spent €82.63. So that was mostly in Hodges and Figgis and Chapters, maybe one or two books in Debray's, because they have that loyalty card system now where they do like discounts if you've got a loyalty card. So you know me, I was wooed by a discount. I had a couple of vouchers, and I didn't include the vouchers that I'd spend in the overall. I just thought we'll stick to the hard-earned money that I traded for books rather than getting vouchers involved. So the total amount of money that I spent on books in 2023 was €725.15, which is astronomical, but we're going to justify it, right? I have to justify. I can't just leave that figure out there floating around. So I will say that 2023 was the year that I got my shit together with my finances. You might not think it because of that, but that would be like my only splurge of the year. I paid off all my debt. I put money aside for like really important shit, like my driving lessons, all that type of thing. I took care of all my bills, all this and that. Like, I made sure that the priority things were sorted out finally. I didn't go on any holidays last year. I didn't do really many fun things. Like, I didn't go into any concerts. I didn't really go out all that much, like on nights out or anything like that, because I have stopped drinking. I don't smoke. I don't really spend money irrationally aside from books, obviously. But yeah, I just think it's interesting to keep track of that, to keep myself accountable and stuff. And now I'm currently on a 6-month book buying ban. I got some books for my birthday that was on the 12th of January. I'm feeling good about being on a book buying ban and kind of focusing on what I have and making better choices, healthier choices for myself, redirecting where I get my happiness from, all that sort of thing. Those are all my reading stats for 2023. I do briefly want to go into my reading goals for 2024. Whether I stick to them, that's something else entirely. First reading goal for 2024 is to read over 50 books. So again, if I manage to read 52 books, that'd be fantastic. Like, that'd be great. Secondly, I want to read a new release for 2024. That's one of the easier ones to mark off. But I am currently on a book buying ban, so I will be having to get this new release from the library. My next goal is that I want to finish a current series. My fourth goal is that I want to read more non-fiction books, obviously, but I'm not going to put a number on it. I'm just going to go with the flow, and hopefully this will be the year that I get back into one of my favorite genres. My next goal is that I want to finish an entire book series, so I want to start it and finish it within 2024. My sixth goal is that I want to complete each TBR list that I set for myself. So I set monthly TBRs for myself, and I've started posting them on here as just YouTube shorts because I find it easier to do. And if you want to check out what I'm aiming to read each month, you can always just look at my little YouTube shorts. It's also a great way for me to share music that I like. My seventh goal is that I want to reduce my physical TBR. I don't know why I say physical TBR because I have no other TBR, because as we've already established, I don't have a Kindle or any sort of e-reader. I want to reduce it by 50%. And that's mainly just to make sure that I keep my focus on reading what I have. And I think that's doable. I think the majority of that goal is going to get done within the first 6 months of 2024 while I'm on this ban. And then my eighth and final reading goal at the moment is that I want to complete a 6-month buying ban. So those are all my reading stats wrapped up for 2023. And my bookish goals for 2024, I'm feeling incredibly positive going into this year. I'm looking forward to all the books that I'm going to be reading. I'm looking forward to finding some new favorites. I'm hoping that 2024 will bring me a great quality of books again because I get to experience them and then talk to you guys about them. I'm just hoping that I can maintain this level of concentration because I feel like it's all balanced on whether I can concentrate or not, and maintaining that I make the time for myself, because that's what my reading is making time for myself in the evening times instead of like watching something or being on the computer or just kind of like wasting time doing things that aren't beneficial to my mental health. I have found that I am just much calmer as a person, and I can sleep better once I get my reading done in the evening times. And it's just a lovely, cozy reading experience. I really, really value it at the moment. Let me know if you managed to hit your reading goal last year or whether it's something that you're going to aim for again this year. And if there's any particular stats that stood out to you, feel free to chat away to me in the comments. Yeah, I'm a little bit anxious about posting this video, so I will just throw that out there. But anyway, if you want to keep up with me outside of YouTube, you can follow me on my Instagram or my TikTok. And if you haven't already done so, please feel free to like and subscribe because it really, really helps the channel out, especially since I haven't been posting super regularly. I'm going to try to get back to doing that this year as well, instead of just posting one video a month. But anyway, yeah, so that has been this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.